We're back for chapter 4 of Gooney Bird Greene. When we left Gooney Bird, she just finished telling about that long journey with a mystery and a rescue. So how she moved from China and had a flying carpet adventure. Chapter 4. On Monday, Gooney Bird stood in front of the class when Mrs. Pigeon told her it was story time. The children barely noticed Gooney Bird's clothes, even though she was wearing a ruffled pinafore, dark blue knee socks, and high-top basketball sneakers. The second graders and Mrs. Pigeon were all too much more interested in Gooney Bird's earrings. The earrings dangled and glittered and were very large. "They're beautiful," said Kiko in an odd voice. "My grandma's house has doorknobs that look just like that," Tricia announced. "And she has a very sparkly chandelier in the dining room. My grandma is rich." "Do you have holes in your ears?" Malcolm asked. "My mom does, and my mom went in and had holes stabbed right in her ears with a needle." "I did too," Beanie called out. "I have pierced ears." "And so do I," Mrs. Pigeon told the class. She turned her head from side to side so that all of them could see her small gold earrings. "No," said Gooney Bird, "my earrings screw into my ears. They have little screws that you turn." Barry Tuckerman thrust his arm into the air and waved it wildly. Around him, other children had their hands raised too. "My mom has pierced ears," Barry said loudly. "Ben," Mrs. Pigeon said next. Ben said, "My mom has pierced ears, and so does my grandma." "All right, class," Mrs. Pigeon said. "Does anyone else have something to say that is not about pierced ears? Because it's time for Gooney Bird to begin today's story." All the hands disappeared except one. Chelsea kept her hand high in the air. Mrs. Pigeon sighed. "Chelsea." "My mom has a pierced nose," Chelsea told the class. "Oh no," Kiko said. "I'm gonna be sick." "Shh," said the other children. When the class was quiet, Gooney Bird began her Monday story. The Prince, the Palace, and the Diamond Earrings. Once upon a time, before she moved to Water Tower, when she still lived in China, Gooney Bird Greene was on her porch playing Monopoly against herself. Gooney Bird number 1 was the thimble, and she owned all 4 railroads and St. Charles Place, which she liked because it was magenta. Gooney Bird 2 was the car, and she was having a harder time of it. She owned Atlantic Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue, and she liked the combination of yellow and green. She also owned both Waterworks and the electric company, but unfortunately, she was in jail. Suddenly, just as Gooney Bird number 2 tried unsuccessfully for the second time to throw doubles and get out of jail, she heard someone calling loudly, "Napoleon is missing!" It was the prince who lived next door. Hands flew up in the air, and Gooney Bird looked impatiently at the class. "Oh, I bet you know who that is, huh? Do you think it's Felicia Ann?" "I do." "And I bet that's Barry Tuckerman because he's standing up." "Are these really, really important questions?" she asked, "because I have just barely started my story." One by one, most of the hands went back down. Mrs. Pigeon had picked up the encyclopedia. "Gooney Bird," Mrs. Pigeon said. I have a feeling you know this already, but Napoleon Bonaparte, he was the Emperor of France, she explained. Oh, said Kiko, I love emperors. Mrs. Pigeon, still looking at the encyclopedia, went on. Napoleon was born in 1769. That's more than 200 years ago. Mrs. Pigeon! Mrs. Pigeon! Barry Tuckerman was halfway out his seat, waving his hand. Yes, Barry? My grandmother once saw an emperor butterfly, but now it's extinct. It was purple, Barry Tuckerman said. Gooney Bird sighed. Do you want to hear this story or not? She asked. I can't wear these earrings all day. They're very heavy. Oh, yes, we do, Gooney Bird. Please go on. Ready, everybody? Everyone was ready, so Gooney Bird continued. Gooney Bird! The prince called, sounding very distressed. Napoleon has disappeared! Can you help us find him? Gooney Bird carefully tucked all the Monopoly money under the edge of the board so it wouldn't blow away. There was a slight breeze, and she had problems with money blowing away in the past. She kept her own money collection, which she carried with her at all times, safely contained in a Ziploc bag. Then Gooney Bird set out to look for clues that might reveal the whereabouts of Napoleon. Napoleon was not the Emperor of France. He was a large black poodle. Every hand in the second grade shot up, even Felicia Ann's. I knew that would happen, Gooney Bird said. I just knew it. Time for an intermission, Mrs. Pigeon. Do you want to deal with this? Mrs. Pigeon nodded, and she thought for a second. Then she announced, every child who has a poodle, put your hand down. 4 hands went down. Now, every child whose grandmother has a poodle, put your hands down. 7 more hands were lowered. Every child who knows a poodle who does something interesting or who gets into trouble or who has run away once, put your hands down. Other hands went down, and now there were just 3 hands still in the air. Beanie, what kind of dog do you have? Mrs. Pigeon asked. Golden Retriever. Lovely. Ben? Corgi. Good. And finally, Tricia. I don't have a dog, Tricia said sadly. I'm allergic to dogs, and my mom said that I could never ever have one, and not even a cat, not ever, because I have a terrible asthma attack, and then I would have to go to the hospital and maybe in an ambulance, and we understand, Tricia. And now let's get back to the story, because we still don't know what happened to Napoleon or about the palace or the earrings. Gooney Bird shook her head a little so that the earrings moved and sparkled in a glamorous way. Listen for the word suddenly, Gooney Bird advised. I have put it in the story already, but I'd like to sprinkle in several. Some other suddenlies will be coming soon. Gooney Bird examined the prince's backyard. She saw a place where the ground was disturbed by the corner of the fence. Look, she said, see this bit of dog hair caught in the fence? That looks like Napoleon's. See, she said, pointing next to the newly dug earth. Here is where Napoleon wiggled under the fence. What a good detective you are, the prince said to Gooney Bird. Gooney Bird let herself out of the yard and through the gate. She sniffed. She listened. Suddenly, there's a suddenly, called Malcolm. Good listening, said Gooney Bird. And then she continued. Suddenly, Because of the clues that she smelled and heard, Gooney Bird moved forward. There at the end of the alley was an overturned garbage can. And there, with his head inside the can, was Napoleon eating garbage. He had coffee grounds all over his face, and an orange peel was stuck on one of his ears. "You naughty thing, Napoleon," Gooney Bird said, and she took hold of his collar. Napoleon burped. "Oh no, not garbage, not burping." "Shh," the other children said. Many hands were waving in the air. Mrs. Pigeon stood up. "No stories about dogs eating garbage," she said firmly. "Not even one." All the hands went down. "Please, please, please tell about the palace and the prince and the earrings," Chelsea said. "I'm about to," Gooney Bird said. Gooney Bird took Napoleon back to his house. The prince asked Gooney Bird to go to the palace for a reward. "Did they get all dressed up in ball gowns?" Beanie asked. "And maybe a tiara?" asked Tricia. "I hadn't planned to describe clothes," Gooney Bird said, "but since you asked, I'll include a little descriptive passage here." When she went to the palace, Gooney Bird was wearing clothes from the L.L. Bean catalog. She wore Island Hopper shorts with a front flap pocket and a knit tank top in sun yellow. The prince had on rugged khaki shorts and polyester and a nylon pale khaki plaid short sleeve